I am down here at Brain Dubai, which is the Brain Performance Centre here in JLT. We have brought these guys on as a sponsor and a partner for 2026. The reason we want to work with these guys is ahead of everyone else, they take the most care and they're the most advanced centre for brain health and performance. We've been right around this clinic, we've learnt loads about these guys, and they are going to be looking after our boxers, not just 2026 but and beyond, offering them comprehensive testing on their brains, their cognitive function, their athletic performance, and we're going to continue to work with these guys like no one else does within a promotion, because we really care about our athletes' health, so we want to go in depth into what they do. We're going to go through a full tour of this centre today using Michael, who is one of our pro boxers and also a partner within BATL. So he's going to go around the whole clinic, we're going to talk to the doctors, we're going to go through the testing process and everything these guys have to offer. This is really an incredible centre, and I've never seen anything like it in this sense. So look forward to looking at this.
So hi, my name is Dr. Umair Qureshi. I'm one of the consultant physicians here at the Brain and Performance Centre, and in the lucky position that I lead on our sports and performance and traumatic brain injury protocols.
I'm Michael Roos, professional boxer, amongst other things. I want to ask you, or for me personally, my grandfather was a professional boxer when he was younger. He unfortunately had Parkinson's at the end of his life. So therefore, brain health, brain performance is big in my family. I wasn't allowed to box when I was younger. So I would like to ask you, what is the importance of taking care of your health, taking care of your brain health? What are we actually going to go and do here? I
think the importance of the brain can't be stressed enough. Yeah. It's essentially the computer that's controlling everything. And as such, especially with boxers or anyone who's involved in a high impact combat sports or even sports such as rugby, you're constantly traumatizing the brain. So you're ultimately damaging that computer, and as a result, all the functions that are responsible for that computer are going to be compromised. Yeah. Now, you touched on a very important topic, which was Parkinson's, brain health. Now, typically in boxers, there is an association with constant trauma to the brain, causing what we used to call a punch-drunk syndrome, essentially constant repetitive trauma affecting the brain, affecting the connections within the brain, the circulation, the blood supply, causing inflammation, and ultimately affecting the chemicals or the chemical transmitters within the brain. Yeah. So Parkinson's is a condition associated with a reduction in a chemical which is responsible for coordination of movement. And that's why in your grandfather's case, you probably notice some of those classic symptoms occurring with age. That, to a degree, is different from a genetic condition, which you have a genetic predisposition, although there is likely an interplay. So in your case, probably a little bit more important, and unfortunately, you're not doing yourself too many favors by participating in a high kind of impact or high risk sport. Yeah, you've made a very interesting comment, punch drunk. What do you mean by that? Essentially what it says on the tin. So repetitive trauma, i.e. punching over to the brain, causing almost a impact on cognitive function and almost a condition that mimics dementia, coupled with an impairment of coordination and movement. Almost like you've had a bit too much to drink and you've been involved in a brawl, and as a result of that trauma, lack of movement, lack of coordination. Impaired speech. Absolutely. So it impairs your speech, it impairs your emotions, it impairs your movement, it causes you to stiffen up and cause rigidity. And the best example on the international stage was probably the great Muhammad Ali. Also Parkinson's. Absolutely. Wow. Now what I'm going to say is, you touched on an important point. What can be done? Now the reality is, in boxing, in many impact sports, even in mainstream sports such as rugby, for example, there is an increasing awareness of the impact of traumatic brain injuries. That constant trauma to the brain, where your skull's moving in one way and the brain is almost lagging behind it. You're causing almost a ripping effect or a sharing effect of the brain. Typically on most imaging protocols, you wouldn't pick it up. And people are commonly going through, having a scan, it looks absolutely fine, fair enough, you can continue.
Yeah.
But the reality is the damage that's being done, the inflammation, the impact on blood supply and getting oxygen to the brain is being impaired. It's cumulative. And in the longer term, you're increasing your predisposition to dementia, to TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, and to a long-term reduction in your functioning.
Yeah. This is giving me shivers.
Unfortunately, look, it's a tough one because the sport of boxing is a beautiful sport. Yes. There's no doubt. It's one that requires peak physical, but also cognitive performance.
Yes.
And you're putting yourself in a situation where you are vulnerable, but the key in boxing that many people say is to hit and not get hit.
Yeah.
The question is what is being done or what can be done out there? And I think that's an important point because we originally met, what, about 3-4 months ago?
December, I think.
Yeah. And this was prior to your last fight. Yeah. And we were lucky enough, and you were lucky enough, that we were able to put you through this process, which probably goes over and above, I think, what most standard protocols would be.
I agree, yeah.
So over here, we're lucky enough that we're actually taking brain health. We actually have a duty, I think, to take brain health to another level. And what we do is people who are either professional boxers, even amateur boxers, people who are considering taking this to a higher level need to be licensed in the correct way, but I would argue probably need to go over and above.
Yeah.
And the reason being, we've talked about some of the consequences of repetitive trauma to the brain causing damage to its function. So let's go back to the start and see what can we do to protect you. And in my opinion, at the very least, we should have a full medical assessment, i.e. you'd come in, you'd see a physician who would check you over head to toe, who would run through your history, run through even things like your family history, previous trauma, and see if there's anything that we can almost pick out that would give us any cause for concern.
Yeah.
I would love to do a full cardiovascular check because the association with heart problems in professional athletes is becoming more and more apparent.
That's interesting.
It is. I mean, we've seen real examples. We see it commonly in football, for example, young athletes who unfortunately their heart's stopping. It happened at the Euros with someone like Christian Eriksen. I've seen it in the UK with someone like Francis Mwemba. Big cases. Yeah. But a lot of the time, some people aren't paying attention or due care and attention to this. So I think that's important. Breathing test to look at how well your cardiopulmonary system is working. Yeah. And going above and beyond by doing a VO2 max test. So we do over here a cardiopulmonary exercise test, and that looks at your maximum performance. Yeah. And that's got two main benefits because it gives you an insight into ultimately how fit you are, whether that's in camp or out of camp, and it gives us insights into how your almost the engine that's operating you is working, how well you're getting oxygen in, how well it's getting to your lungs, to your heart, and how well it's being pumped out to your muscles. And people are using that as a training parameter, and people are also using that as a marker for their degree of fitness. Yeah. We then go, like we say, the brain and performance of the brain. Now, there are 2 to 3 layers of testing here. Number one is let's look at the brain. Let's see, is there any evidence of any trauma and damage? And let's look at it in detail. So we use a 3 Tesla MRI, which is basically the highest degree of, I would say, resolution that we can get to look at the brain, to look at its structures, and to look at any pre-existing damage. And the surprising thing is, I've seen professional athletes, I've seen boxers even in their mid-20s with trauma and repetitive trauma causing damage at the brain at such a young age. So it's apparent and it's true, and we need to be aware of that. Number 2, the brain ultimately controls function. So before you might have trauma and damage, let's see what the practical impact of that is. Yeah. So going through a neuropsychological test or evaluation, including assessment of your memory, your attention, your focus, your speed of thinking, and your higher level functioning is important because it will give us clues as to how that brain is working.
It gives you a baseline.
Absolutely. So let's say
that you track it over time, of course.
Yes, absolutely. The trend is important. Yeah. Your degree of cognition might not be mine at the start, but what's more important is how the trend is. How are you changing year by year? Because the reality is, at your age, you shouldn't be declining. Arguably, you should be improving. Yeah. So if we're seeing certain patterns, that's obviously of some concern. And we need to continually look into why this is changing.
Is there any practicality, or what's the practicalities you can, is there anything that you can do to protect yourself from, apart from not boxing at all? Which
You took my answer away from me.
I think you were about to say. But is there literally anything that you can do to protect yourself? Make sure you're hydrated, make sure you're fueled properly, not be hard sparring all of the time. But is there anything else that you would recommend?
I mean, look, the core principles of when it comes to protecting brain health don't change, whether you're a professional boxer or whether you're somebody who's completely sedentary.
Yeah.
If you keep those basic concepts in place and those basic principles, which is ultimately regular cardiovascular training, irrespective of whether you're an athlete or not an athlete, and ideally a minimum of 150 minutes per week to the point of breathlessness. This is for the general population, that's an advice, so you're keeping yourself active. Stress regulation, keeping yourself, not letting stress overthrow you or almost encapsulate how you're functioning. Use stress in a positive way, but don't use it in a negative way. Being aware of your own psychological strengths and weaknesses, whether it's your mood, whether it's your anxiety symptoms, and seeking advice and help when you need it. From a nutritional point of view, ensuring you're well hydrated, ensuring you're eating a well-balanced diet, very simple kind of practices. And like we say, for every single person, you are the best judge of your own performance. If you're starting to notice that things are changing in any way, a lot of people unfortunately put themselves, are in denial or are finding a reason as to why you're feeling a certain way. But if there's anything that's changed, you should seek advice, you should seek a professional to have a look at you, because anything that you're aware of, it probably means that there is something that's underlying it. Seek professional advice, seek professional help. And like you say, it's difficult for us to advocate a sport where ultimately you're putting yourself at risk. What you need to do is put in places safeguards that are going to prevent that high risk situation from becoming more of a problem.
And the only way to do that is to track trends over time.
Absolutely.
Which is what you do here, funnily enough.
So, yeah, agreed. We would like, and in your case, you're well aware, we want to see you on a yearly basis. Why? Because we have a baseline of where you are. And I would probably advocate for anyone in boxing, even at the start of your career. So, younger athletes, come in, get a check, see where you're at, and monitor it. Because there'll come a point where you'll have to make a choice where, do I want to progress and continue with my career? What can I do to protect myself? Or maybe there's a point at which the repetitive trauma is putting yourself at risk.
Becoming detrimental to your ability to function.
Yeah, and remember, boxing is important for a lot of people. It is their career. However, life is just as important, and when one can impact the other, you've got to make a decision. We were talking about this earlier. I would probably say the best analogy that I can do and why testing is so important. Think about a car. Think about a Formula One car. You wouldn't get into a car having not tested the tires, not tested the engine, not testing the chassis, the steering. These guys are driving around at 200 miles per hour plus. Even if one part of that car is not functioning properly, can you imagine the impact that that's going to have? And the safety aspect for the driver. Why is your body as a boxer or as an athlete no different?
I agree.
And that's, I think, something that needs to be emphasized within the world of boxing, but even to the individuals out here.
So what you're saying is, I'm an F1 car and I need to be treated as such.
Absolutely. The argument is there, absolutely. You need to understand that your body is an asset and it needs to be regularly serviced and it needs to be regularly fine-tuned.
Look after it. I could talk for hours about certain things you just said. Stress impacts me, I think, probably more so than others. I would like to know why that is. However, we could talk for hours, so maybe we're better off to cut it out.